was a dark and stormy night, nor'easter rolling in. It's a long 12 hours, the power's out again. I pray for inner strength and that we don't lose no lives. Just another day in the first responders' eyes. Half a cup of coffee's gone, the first run comes in. A car slid off the road, there's a family trapped within. My heart beats like a hammer, I can barely catch my breath. I'm thinking the worst and hoping for the best. Yeah, we ain't superheroes, we're just ordinary people trying to make a difference, and the first on every scene. It's a heavy, heavy burden to carry all this burden when you can't unsee the things you've seen. It keeps going on when those sirens are gone.
Welcome to another episode of the Making a Difference Mad Radio Show here in Fishbowl Radio Network Studios, broadcasting you live from Globe Life Park, the heart of Arlington Entertainment's District, man. I am here with my co-host, Sam Horwitz.
Hey, hey.
Hey, hey, man. It's our first day back in the studio, man. We've had a rough couple of weeks, and thank to the Fishbowl staff for getting us back in here. When we first came into the studio, it smelled like it was a bleach bomb went off. They disinfected everything. So thank you, Fishbowl, for doing what you're doing to keep all our hosts safe from this COVID-19. Once again, this is your First Responder Network, man. We are here to always look out for our first responders' mental health, to back you up, to make sure that your voices are being heard in every aspect of your job performance. Myself, I am a retired New York City detective, if you don't know that, and Sam is retired Secret Service. So together, collectively, we bring about 30 to 40 years of first responder experience to the table. So, Sam, once again, it's been a pleasure to have you as a co-host, and you've been bringing on some great guests for the mental health aspect of our first responders. Who do we got coming in today?
Oh,
calling in
because we're still doing this remotely. We have got Dr. Sara, and please excuse me, I'm going to get clarification on her name. I believe it's Jahnke. She is the director and senior scientist of the Center for Fire Rescue and EMS Health Research at the National Development and Research Institute USA Incorporated. Woo, mouthful.
Well, that was a mouthful, man.
Yeah. Well, basically, I came across Doc's research online, and it's going to be a really awesome conversation because a lot of the research, this is brand new to come out, and it's kind of like there's some controversy around it. So woo-hoo-hoo.
Regarding what? Regarding what?
Well, it's a therapy protocol called rumination, and
we'll let her.
We're gonna let the doc explain exactly
Excellent.
what it is, but it hasn't been always. It's not always looked at as a positive thing.
Okay. Well, like me and
you. The study that she's gonna bring forward talks about how. In some cases it is. So this was very interesting when I started doing research and being like,
excellent.
Wait, I thought this was bad.
No, but it brings another aspect to the point of mental health, because we've always discussed, sometimes therapy couch is not a place for somebody to be mentally evaluated. Sometimes it takes, EMDR, EMRD, EMDR.
Yeah, right the first time.
Or it takes, hiking or kayaking to really get your mind centered. Sometimes what works for one person doesn't work for the other. So, let's keep an open mind about this therapy and let's listen to it, because it may help and may make a difference in some first responders' lives out there.
We'll see.
We will see. You know, I also want to give a shout out to Tarrant County Sheriff Bill Wayburn and Fort Worth Police Officer Lisa Ramsey, who joined us on that Zoom meeting the other day. Me and Sam are now hosting Mental Health Monday for our first responders through our Zoom call, because the pandemic is really affecting a lot of our a lot of our first responders. I mean, they're overwhelmed with fatigue and the hours and just the things that they're seeing. So Sheriff Wayburn joined us. We're so happy to have him on, and I would love to have that man as a boss. I would work for that
You're
man.
not kidding.
I would work for that man for free, because to hear him speak about the passion he has for the job, for the proactivity that he brings forth, and we always say it starts at the top, right?
Yep,
and he's the top. He's the top, and man, he looks out for his officers, right?
I was so pleasantly surprised. I hate to say that.
Because you don't really see that.
You're right. Everything's in reaction mode, but the forethought and the proactivity and all of the steps and the protocols that he has in place and has from the minute this thing became a thing.
Right.
He is really on leading the front lines in protecting his folks against this. Because let's face it, when you're running a jail, it's pretty crazy if it breaks out. And I read every day. I was like, why are we letting people out of prison? Because they're committing crimes, and that's not helping the situation.
Right.
Just saying.
And he's got so much, and he's bringing all this proactivity to stop his officer. But he had a general concern for the inmates. He had a heart for the inmates, man. He had a general concern about their health, and like you said, you do not see some people are at the top. Chiefs of police, chiefs of fire departments. They don't want to be bothered with the stuff. They kind of push that stuff down to their underlings, right? Not Sheriff Wayburn, man. He wants to be involved. He's calling officers at home and checking on their families. Now that's just somebody who deserves that position, and that's why Tarrant County is where it's at, because you have leaders like that. You have true leaders.
Absolutely.
And then you have Lisa Ramsey, right?
Yeah, she's an inspiration. We're going to get her in here because you want to talk about a true story of overcoming her odds and what she has been through, and to be on the job as somebody who is paralyzed from the chest down. Yes,
Yep.
I said still on the job.
Yeah.
So we're going to get her in studio to talk about how she, processed everything and how she used her experience to really inspire and touch others. And I mean, that's what Making a Difference Mad Radio is all about. And, if you are listening and you are a first responder or family of a first responder, please let them know that every Monday, until further notice, we are hosting Mental Health Mondays.
Yep.
And we have great time. Everybody that showed up, it's all over Facebook. We put it out there on social media.
We had a New Jersey EMS representative.
Yep.
Came on. He brought in a good, stuff from the East Coast, which was good stuff that we may have never heard of.
Yeah. So what I'm doing is I am posting the Zoom link.
Yes.
So everybody knows the Zoom link will be posted on badgeofhonor.com. That's the letter A, badgeofhonor.com, homepage, and you will need a password to access that. And as it gets closer, that password will be made available, but not right off the
not right off the bat.
Right on the outset.
Yeah,
because Zoom is great, but Zoom is we don't want to get hijacked. It's happening.
And with Lisa, Lisa reminds me of remember Stephen McDonald. He was the New York City police officer back in 1984 or 86. He was a Central Park police officer who got shot in the neck by two underage kids. And he was paralyzed from the neck down, but continued to stay on the job. And he shared his story of how he dealt with it, how he dealt with the traumas, and what he did to not let that impairment take over his life. And Lisa is the same way. She has forged forward and just, where other people would have given up and quit, she keeps her perseverance and keeps moving forward.
Yeah.
It's a blessing. It's such a blessing.
It is amazing.
But we've met so many of these people through this show. We continue to meet people that, either prove us wrong on one level because we like, wow, that was amazing how you did that. And they show us that, there's no reason to give up.
Well, there's also, they show us there's no boundaries.
There's no boundaries. Yeah.
The boundaries are self-created things. And man, just every day what they do to just get prepared to go out into the world. I mean, we have it easy. And I always say, look at these people's stories if you're complaining about something.
Right. And well, you think about it too, and when we look at Lisa, we can get up. I can walk out of my living room, go into my kitchen, grab something to drink, get out the door, go open the garage, get in my car, go to 7-Eleven, go to Albertsons, go to Kroger, run in, pick up a half gallon of milk, and come home, right? And I get all that done in 15 minutes, right? For her now, that's a 3, 4, 5 hour exhausting job just to go to the grocery store.
Yeah, they're definitely being part of veteran service organizations and having a lot of experience with wheelchair athletes in some arenas.
Well, Steve does a lot of this stuff with
and understanding what, when they open their eyes in the morning, what their mornings look like. And you're right, it's hours. Hours,
right. And someone brought into perspective not too long ago, and I forgot where I read it. I either read it on the internet or I saw it on a news channel when we talked about all these people hoarding the toilet paper and hoarding the food. Well, hoarding the meat and hoarding the food, and they brought up the elderly and the people that don't drive their cars. They end up taking public transportation to this grocery store. And when we're in this pandemic, we think about how easy it is to just jump in our car, go to the store, and we can load it up. We can load up everything into our trunks and into our back seats. But, you have elderly people out there that, either have to take public transportation or it's a chore for them to get into their car and drive to the grocery store. And we've all seen them. We've all seen those people walking across the parking lot. They're moving at a snail's pace because they can't walk that fast, or they have hip problems or leg problems, right? So it takes them 15, 20 minutes to even get from the parking lot into the store, right? By the time they get a cart and they get into the aisle that they got to get into, right? And then to find nothing there. Yeah. Can you imagine? You're exhausted. You're in your late 70s, early 80s. You can't walk that well. You travel to the store. You're exhausted. Finally get into the store to just go buy milk, and it's not there. And
it's gone. Yeah.
That's got to be devastating for even our elderly who aren't handicapped.
For sure.
For
sure.
So let's always, keep in mind these people that throughout the pandemic, how easy we have it, how blessed we are, and that the people that are physically challenged or elderly, it's a chore for them to get to that store. Think about that next time you see somebody walking across the parking lot at a snail's pace.
And it really hasn't been difficult to, just do the stay-at-home thing and just go to the grocery store when you need to.
I'm actually kind of enjoying it.
That drives me crazy.
Oh yeah, well, most, if I hold on.
Tell you, I think this is Doc calling in.
Hi, welcome to Mad Radio, Making a Difference Wednesday. You are on the air.
Hi, this is Dr. Sara Jahnke.
How are you doing, Dr. Sara Jenkins? How are you?
Good. How are you?
Thank you so much.
I got the name right.
You did, yes. And I think I said it right, too.
You did.
Thank you so much for calling in. We really appreciate you taking the time out during, everything you got going on. Sam's right here. She has told me some wonderful, extraordinary things that you have completed, have you done for our first responder community, and things that you have coming up.
I don't like to be bored. So, yeah.
Well, that's great. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell our listeners and how they can,
Well, tell us how you got started. Your schooling. You look like I'm going to compliment you. People tell me I look like I'm 18. You look like you're 12.
Thank you.
I got her picture.
Yeah,
I forgot.
put her picture up.
I got to
there.
put her picture up.
And
Give me 1 second.
So you're a PhD. You're a doctor. You went through all this schooling, and you are all over the internet right now on different social media platforms, really spearheading and talking about research out there, helping our first responder community. And we'll get into the most recent study that you talked about on April 12th. But just tell everybody listening, a little bit about you and how you got to be the director and senior scientist of the Center for Fire, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, quite by accident, honestly. I have been doing this research for a little over a decade, but it's one of those stories where, this was not what I set out to do. So my PhD is in psychology, and when I started, I really wanted to do clinical work with little kids, like play therapy and make a difference early on. And then I started working with kids, and I loved the kids, but I hated their parents, and I decided I needed a different path. So
that's a good one.
Yeah. So. But I had been, at the time I was doing my graduate training, and I was working on some research on military health and substance use in the military, mental health in the military. And around the time that I was finishing up my PhD, one of the assistants to the fire chiefs in Kansas City, Missouri, got in touch, and we had lunch, and he said, what the fire service is really trying to do with the assistance to firefighter grants is ramp up the research that the military has. And, the military has this, these amazing, very well-funded programs of research that have sustained a lot of researchers and really brought a lot of knowledge out. And so the fire service kind of wanted to start that on a smaller scale. He thought I might be interested because I grew up around the fire service. Dad retired about, now it's been, I look like I'm 12, but really I'm 40, and he retired when I was in college as chief of Overland Park Fire Department right outside of Kansas City, and bought a company that sells fire training towers, and so he stayed in that community, but started with folks that he knew and that I knew through him just growing up, and a lot of fire chiefs in Kansas City that were pretty well connected into the national that could sit down with me over lunches and dinners and walk me through what they saw as research needs. So did that and work with some awesome folks who have amazing stats and methods backgrounds. And so I still work on their military stuff. They work on a lot of fire service stuff. And it just really kind of started from there. I mean, the field, if you look at the history of firefighter health research, I was one time having a conversation with Billy Goldfeder, and he said, the research that's been done in the last 10 years has eclipsed the research done.
I've worked with Billy Goldfeder. I've worked a couple times with with close.
Sometimes he just makes stuff up.
Close calls.
He makes stuff up. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and sometimes he'll throw some stuff out, and I say that with all the love in the world, but he'll say something like that, and I'm like, is that true? Is he giving us too much credit? But it's true. I went and looked, and it was actually, it's 68% of the hits on PubMed from firefighter health, on anything firefighter related in the medical literature is the last 10 years, really. So, really awesome time to get involved in it. And, I would like to say that it's for totally selfless reasons that, I just want the fire service to be healthier. But really, Billy asked me to do a chapter in the new Pass It On. Mm-hmm. And it was what do you want to tell the fire service? And so it was kind of a little bit of soul searching, why do I do this? What motivates me? And it really is there are things that I wish, things that I've seen with my dad in the fire service and out of the fire service that, he's had a couple heart attacks, he's had cancer. Mm-hmm. What do I wish he had known when I was 10 years old? And what I wish he would have changed? Fortunately, he's still with us, and I want to keep him with us as long as possible, but I want to keep him with us as long as possible. So it's all kind of goes back to my dad, dedicated to my dad.
Well, Sarah, you think about the fire service back then, because I retired as a fire chief out of Farmingdale, New York, and I did 23 years in the fire service, and that's how I know Billy, and one of my first cousin is Vincent Dunn. I don't know if you heard of him with the FDNY. So when I joined the fire service back in '85, and a big thing that when you talk about cancers and stuff, when we talk about the foam, just the foam that we used back then, the AFFF foam, the cancers that are coming out now in the fire service just due to that. And back then, and your dad will tell you that if you wore a Scott pack back in '85, you weren't a snot slinging firefighter. You had to come out of that fire, snot out of your nose, black, coming out, coughing up, grab a cigarette, and sit on the back of the truck. That's what made a firefighter.
For days, right?
That's what made a firefighter. You got to come out of that fire looking black and smoky and weathered. But now we know. Now, due to your research and due to a lot of research that we see out there, the health effects back then we didn't look at the health effects on our first responders, physically or mentally, 20 years ago. Now it's catching up with us.
Yeah, it is, and it is catching up. But at the same time, sometimes they tell me I'm too Pollyannish about it, but I appreciate how much there is talk about it. And maybe people are just talking to me about it because that's what I'm interested in. And it's that whole, what is the saying? If you're a hammer, everything's a nail. But I do hear people talking about it, and I see the ads that are out there now for gear. It's not a filthy firefighter. It's often a clean firefighter, or there's sometimes even, dare I say, women in their advertisements. I think it takes time to change, but I feel like I feel like there is a lot of push in that area now. And so I'm, eternally optimistic that it's changing. I think a lot of what you just described, if you did that today, and not all departments, there are departments that it's still the norm, but there are a lot of departments where that would not be acceptable, and that's amazing.
When I first joined the fire service, and I was back in 1985, we had a pair of rubber boots, a jacket, and a leather helmet. Which now, you wear a leather helmet, it's so taboo because it holds all the hazardous materials. It can't be cleaned. So, you're putting that on your head day after day after day after day. The carcinogens that are in the smoke, and, they just lay in your helmet and your gear. And you never washed your gear. Ask your dad if he ever washed his fire helmet. My God, you'd never wash your fire helmet.
Oh, no.
No.
Well, once he was cheap, he just always carried it in the back of his Ford Explorer.
Yeah.
And so it always smelled like smoke in there.
Yep.
So, yeah. At the time, I was like, oh, that's cool, and now I'm like, oh, my God.
Right. See? And at the time, you said exactly what everybody else says. Oh, man, that's cool. And that was the way of life back then. And then, then we look at, I don't actually think we started looking at firefighter cancers until really after 9/11.
I was just going to say it really has been the research, everything. The big, I'll call it whoopsie kind of. It was more like a screw you with the whole. You don't need to wear a mask.
Right.
I mean, I was down there. I coughed for a year, and was not a firefighter. I was down there as a first responder doing my job, and these guys day after day after day, and there wasn't anything that really started. Not even right after 9/11, when the first stories started to break about the air quality and that, hey, we should pay attention, maybe get some chest x-rays. And then it seemed like a little bit of time. There was a time lag again where nothing was talked about.
To try to get it passed.
And then, boom, everyone's like, why can't I stop coughing? Why do I have asthma? What do you mean I have cancer? And now it's all over the place. And let's lump, PTS in there because, when you talk about stress, we got to lump in all the heart attacks, the increase in cholesterol levels, our folks not having access to mental health treatment for whatever reason. And now on a daily basis, you can go on the World Wide Web and you can really find a ton of studies. And I'm just, in the interest of time, Doc, I would love to dive into the most recent thing that came out, which I love the title of this. It's COVID-19 from post-traumatic stress to post-traumatic growth. Fantastic article, and you've written, hey, Sammy, you've written another article as well I saw today. But this caught my eye because as John and I, we both have our post-traumatic stress journeys here, and we both have been through different therapy protocols. As I was reading this, there's something that came up, this word called rumination. And the thing that you talk about is a 2019 study which is predicting post-traumatic growth among firefighters, the role of deliberate rumination and problem-focused coping. I'm like, I love it. But wait a second. This rumination thing. Okay. So I started digging. That's what I do. And rumination has not such a great history with specifically post-traumatic stress. And I'll just read, excerpts of a couple of things that I came across about rumination. First, it's considered a type of cognitive avoidance strategy that when utilized can perpetuate post-traumatic stress symptoms. That's not good. That doesn't sound very good. And individuals with post-traumatic stress have reported that rumination triggers intrusive thoughts and memories more frequently than individuals who have experienced trauma without developing post-traumatic stress. And on top of that, you've got a negative appraisal strategies include ruminations with feeling of guilt and self-blame, and this maladaptive emotion regulation forms a feedback loop to further influence the perception of the trauma and exacerbate the symptoms of post-traumatic stress. Lots of the
Oh my
word
God,
exacerbation. They even have a
I'm
chart.
full. I am full. I'm full.
Okay.
I just had a whole meal.
I know. I think I'm blowing people up here. But they even have a chart like connected to one of these studies with it looks like an explosion in the middle of it, and it talks about that rumination being maladaptive. So I'm just playing that card because that's kind of when I was going through post-traumatic stress. These studies are older, and I was like, rumination? No, what the heck? So let's please educate us, because this study is fascinating, and tell us how, because we got a lot of people that have a lot of experience with post-traumatic stress. Either they have it themselves or they know somebody with it. Tell us how the role of deliberate rumination and problem-focused coping is of great assist to us.
So I'll be honest, your response to that is the reason I picked that article to highlight, because I had the same response where I'm like, rumination, that sounds stupid. Maybe they have the wrong concept or the wrong
Right.
construct. But it was interesting when I started thinking about it, because, when I talked to the editor, she said, we're doing anything on COVID. I know you've got the behavioral health stuff. Is there anything you can think of? And there was already a lot of talk about like managing the stress of it in terms of, preventing post-traumatic stress. But I've had a lot of people challenge me on kind of the opposite of post-traumatic stress. I mean, we see, yes, there are instances, particularly like post 9/11, post Oklahoma City bombing, high rates of post-traumatic stress, injuries among first responders. But the fact that, like, overall, when we do like population-based studies, the fact that first responders and firefighters show up to everyone's worst day, and more of them aren't just like obliterated by it, that they have these like positive adaptive coping mechanisms, that they actually love their job when their job is to respond to dead people, I think talks a lot about this resilience and growth in that firefighters, that I think the job calls for. And so when I read that article, I was like, man, I've never thought of rumination in that way. But the way that authors talk about it is they really talk about it as not the traditional rumination, but like as a purposeful rumination. So I kind of like to think of it as not running from your problems. So like if it's bothering you, it's not the rumination. It's, they don't define it as a rumination where like it's intrusive thoughts and you just can't get rid of it. It's more of like a being thoughtful and mindful about what is going on and thinking through it and coping with it and making sure that you realize like when you are struggling or something's bothering you, or, I mean, this pandemic hits first responders hard in so many different ways, right? I mean, it's just like seriously unprecedented in the history. I mean, even the pandemic of 1918 didn't have the fire service set up the way the fire service is today. So it's never been responded to in this way and required what this pandemic is requiring of firefighters. So I think it's a time that can be incredibly stressful. And you have layered on top of that the family stress of it. I was talking to a chief today who said, it's so weird. I'll have firefighters that'll show up and not want to go in on a scene because it's a possible COVID. But these are the same people that I can put in a hazmat suit and say, if you go inside and breathe even a tiny bit of this air, it could kill you. And they're like, oh yeah, suit me up. I'm going in. I'm good. Where do you want me?
Right. But Sarah, can I ask you a question? Let me ask you a question on that. When we talk about this pandemic and we talk about the stresses and we talk about, every first responder is able to overcome and adapt, and that's because most of them run on adrenaline, right? So, when we're doing our jobs and our coping mechanisms are good until they're not good, until we're in our own mind, and that's the isolation aspect of pandemic. Now we are not out with others. We are in our own mind at our homes. But fatigue, I think, is playing a big role as well in our first responders' stress level right now, because they're, someone who's been used to working 8 hours is now mandated to work 12. Instead of working 3 days, you're working 5 or 7 days. And
which is what is 12. Sorry.
Right.
It's really, by the time all is said and done, at 15.
Yes. And the toll that it's taking on the physical fatigue is setting in on our first responders, that our brains can't cope with stuff, and now we're going to be making poor judgments. So, when you say a firefighter's like, I'm not going to go in, I can't suit up for that COVID, because now, he's fearing that he's going to bring that home.
Well, is it that they've reached the point of overwhelm as well?
Well,
because you take on the lack of sleep, which I was like the poster child for that.
Right.
I couldn't think.
But I'll look at it on my aspect as a firefighter, right?
Right.
And as a hazmat technician, okay. When she just brought up, you suit up in a level A suit, and your guy says, hey, if you even have a pinhole in your suit, you're going to die.
Yeah,
right?
but you do it.
Okay, but I'm going to do it, right? But then you talk about the COVID, right?
It might,
oh no, I'm not going to die, but I can cross contaminate and bring that back to my
family,
wife and kids.
Right. So if I die,
there's
it's
a big stress there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's just no. I mean, that's the thing, though, is like this is an animal that you just hasn't been seen before, and so of course it's incredibly stressful. There's the stress of like a lot of departments are trying to socially distance with the firefighters, so you don't have that set down around the kitchen table, which we know is so protective for firefighters, just kind of that camaraderie. So a lot of them don't have that. Different firefighters have to all that kind of stuff. And then you brought up sleep.
Yeah.
If you want, so the more I've been reading up on sleep, I was challenged to kind of become familiar with that literature and how it affects fire service. I am now convinced that sleep underlies and overlies most of the health issues that are in the fire service and exacerbates them. If you want to be scared straight on your sleep, read the book by Dr. Walker. I want to say what's his first name? I can't remember his first name, but Dr. Walker is his last name. It's a book called Why We Sleep, and it's the most amazing book, and it walks you through everything from how sleep affects mental health to how it affects cognition, memory, and I think even like that working those long shifts and that being tired and not being able to shut your mind off, I think all of that is exacerbated by not being able to sleep because of the way that memories are kept. You
Right.
you both remember and forget based on how your sleep is, and that process in your mind goes. Your mind decides what to remember and what to forget while you're sleeping. And I think the interruption of that, the World Health Organization has now classified shift work as a class 1 carcinogen, because it just so messes up your body. So I think that on top of everything else, it's just, and then there's just so many unknowns.
Right, and have we ever done a
so
sleep study on our first responders? I mean, a really in-depth sleep study on our first responders. They're probably not getting even before the pandemic, I'm sure they weren't getting the proper sleep. And now I'm sure most of them are getting no sleep, not good rest, not good REM sleep anyway.
Yeah.
Which can
Well,
cause
and
underlying
then,
problems.
Yeah, just call volume, and then, even being home. And being home has, being stuck at, the stay at home, I appreciate that, but that comes with problems. That's not, without stress in terms of, family stress. And that's a lot of time to spend with the same people all the time. I love my family. They're not listening to this, so I can say some days it's about to drive me insane. And my job is just, my day-to-day job is sitting at a computer, and it's not really, deadlines and stuff like that, but nowhere near what fire service folks face. And then, how does that work if you have kids back and forth with shared custody? just like it's just a disaster in terms of stressors for first responders. But that's where I think going back to the post-traumatic growth, I think the other beauty of this of situations like this is that there really is an opportunity for growth, and to kind of reassess. When they talk about post-traumatic growth as a construct, the idea is that you take a stressful opportunity and you use it to, reassess and reprioritize your life, grow from it and use it for kind of purposeful. But I think that
kind of like this radio show.
Yeah, kind of like what we're doing with the radio, and then our badge of honor. And, using.
Kinda,
I
you're
always
right.
say that, there was a reason that I didn't pull the trigger, in my basement, and that I could bear the scars of 9/11 and everything that I went through to help others.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. And I can only imagine, I've obviously not been in your shoes, and so appreciate the work both of you have done and your dedication to this issue and your service. But probably to get where you are at today has taken a lot of time thinking through everything, like your priorities in life and your, how you're going to manage things, how you're going to positively impact the world around you. These things unfortunately don't just cure themselves without a lot of kind of thought and awareness and mindfulness about it.
Mine started out with, how are we going to get out of bed today?
Right. But I got to say, we were blessed. Our paths crossed, and I believe that is what's put us here. And not everybody is as blessed as our network of people to have crossed paths with that right person in their life. They may cross it with an addiction, somebody who's a very addictive personality, where that's gonna it's gonna make the PTSD even worse.
Well, that's how the
here
universe works.
Here at least we're able to heal each other. We know what's going through each other's minds sometimes. But when you have a person, a law enforcement, firefighter, who is battling some sort of post-traumatic stress, and then he goes to the bar and he hooks up with a meth dealer, his inhibitions are down. So now, his addictions are going to start going out of control, or whatever method he uses. It could be a poor judgment on that aspect. So, we're just scratching the surface. I believe we're just scratching the surface 20 years after 9/11 on the PTSI aspect. We're still learning so many different treatments and theories and because everybody's an individual. Everybody's brain works differently.
And Doc, you said in the beginning when you started talking, you used the word injury, and I just want to say, John, from John and I both, we so appreciate that, because we do think it should be called post-traumatic stress injury, because of the so many people, not just us, that we can live with it, but we've come back from it. We've done this post-traumatic growth, if you will, and are using our experiences in a positive way. And I want to touch back on this rumination thing real quick. I didn't get super deep into the actual study. Would somebody use this as a treatment protocol? And if so, would the practitioner doing this treatment protocol, I mean, would they have to be trained specifically, or could it be done generally? Is that a good question?
So that's a great question. And the way that the study did it was, it didn't actually, so it wasn't asking for any kind of treatment. They basically measured a whole bunch of variables about personality and how people cope. The personality types, they had, I think, a couple measures on resilience. And then they did basically where they looked at what was statistically related to these positive outcomes. And so it wasn't actually a treatment, but it is similar to some of the treatments that you can effectively use for things like post-traumatic stress injuries. And it's so some of them that are, and you might have already covered this on the show, so totally stop me if you have, but anything from like the EMDR treatments, the prolonged exposure treatments, cognitive behavioral treatments, they all kind of have this underlying thread of, you have to think through the processes. You have to think through the experiences. You basically retrain your brain as what those therapies are doing. And what they talk about in the purposeful rumination, the concept of it is not in terms of like a treatment or something that you would necessarily like purposely go in and find a practitioner to walk you through. Although in a lot of ways it is what therapy is, this thoughtfully purposely thinking about what's going on and how you're coping with it and how you're managing it. And so I think that it is similar to what the treatments are for like a post-traumatic stress injury, but it wasn't necessarily something that they went and sought out. It was just a way that they learned to cope with the world. And I think kind of the take-home message of it is, you can't hide from the stress of what's going on. You can't pretend it's just not stressful. And you might feel like you can just put it away. One of my favorite, and tell me if this resonates with you, but one of my favorite examples of mental health, and I've heard two kind of different variations on it from people I just have all the respect in the world for, but they talked about that all the calls, all your worst calls, all the good calls, like get filed away. The bad calls kind of get locked in your mind behind a door. They said, you put a padlock on the door and it's there. It's there. You're careful who you give the key to. You don't open the door that often, but it's still there. And I loved that example because I think it gives a visual to what your brain does do, which is codes all the shit that you see. I mean, it's in there. And I think you can't pretend like none of it bothers you. I think when you start thinking that none of it bothers you, that's kind of the danger. That's kind of the danger zone. Because I think it does affect you. The memories are built in. Different things are going to affect different people at different times for different reasons, and that's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with you if one specific call doesn't bother you. But I just don't think fire service and EMS and police, I don't think they can do what they do every day without it affecting their worldview. Like, you show up to everyone's worst day and you see them at their worst.
But see, I don't mean to cut you off, but I just want, before I forget, because you're going down a road that I wanted to hit on. When you turn around and say it's not affecting, the firefighter or the police officer, the EMS guy, they're kind of putting it in the back of their brain. And that's when it becomes that invisible silent killer. Because I know myself, 10 years before I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, because I would lock everything down, and I kind of, like you said, my emotional aspect in life really became so jaded that I started not caring, and it almost got to the point where it was too late. And like I said, thank God I was blessed that there were people around me to get me out of that. But right now, our first responders are going through that, and we can't let them hold that down. We can't let them pretend it doesn't bother them, because it's gonna come out and it's gonna rear its ugly head at the worst time of their life, and that's too late.
Yeah, one of the things, Doc, that you said, and that what you shared did absolutely resonate with me. I heard a different variation on it from a veteran that talked about, putting everything in the locker, and then you've got the padlock, and then eventually it's so full that when you go to close the lid, it won't close.
Well, that lock's gonna break.
Yeah, and that's when we have that. So now it won't close, and we're trying everything we can to just, let me get a bigger lock, let me see what I can do, and stuff starts leaking out. And I think, I'll speak for me. I try to compartmentalize everything. And first of all, first responders, I will say, we are the worst because of our level of training, which, supersedes human beings in most of the workforce. We believe falsely that we can fix everything, including ourselves. And it's until you're faced with this, right? So until you're faced with your locker overflowing, and I had the leakage and the overflow that I tried to stop, and man, if I smelled concrete burning, the olfactory for me was like, woof.
So yeah, I don't see it. I see. I don't have a PhD, but
neither do I.
But I mean, and that's why I just turn around and say I look at it as the robot syndrome. We're trained, we're geared, we're cut from that cloth that makes everybody feel like a robot, where all we have to do is just reset, and everything is gone.
Adapt.
But,
right.
adapt.
Like reset,
so
adapt,
we're trained like robots to have no emotional side, to make sure that nothing bothers us, to keep forging on, to keep going, to keep going, to keep going, to keep going, and that we just plug in and reset every night. And that, we get that mentality inside of us, and that's not who we are. We're human beings with living human parts that break down. And,
Well, it's incredibly adaptive to be able to do that, right?
Right.
Like if you did break down at every call that someone, died and you were pulling them out of a car every time, then you couldn't do the job. So it is adaptive until, like you said, it works until it doesn't. It is adaptive until it's not.
So what makes a firefighter? What makes a
you.
firefighter or EMS or see, when you say we don't break down at every call, and I love that expression, we don't break down at every call, right? Because we hold it in. But you know what? If a cop gets shot, a firefighter dies in the line of duty, or an EMS personnel gets hit by a car out on a roadway, and his brothers and sisters show up, guess what? We cry, right? We cry for them.
Yeah.
But we won't cry. We won't cry for the cardiac arrest. We won't cry for the baby that drowned. We won't cry for the burn victim. We won't cry for the shooting victim. But we will cry for our own. How do our bodies do that?
Yeah.
How do our brains work like that? That to me is amazing.
Yeah, and I think part of it is just the pathways of how your mind processes it. You're able to kind of pull that curtain for, the number of times I've heard people say, like, I great story where this guy was telling me, he goes, I showed up on the scene, guy got hit literally hit by a train. He was like just body parts all over the place. We're picking this guy up. He goes, I helped. I picked up pieces, put it. He goes, it wasn't until I started to walk away that someone said, "Do you realize that was so and so?" And it was someone he knew.
Oh.
And he said, I just went in like you said, robot mode to just get it done. And I think it is incredibly adaptive until it's not.
Until it's not.
And I think if you believe, I think what scares me most is when I hear someone that says nothing ever bothers them. Because it takes about 2 scratches before they start going, okay, wait a minute. The number of times I've been pulled aside after talking about something, or after, having this kind of conversation where someone goes, actually, and it's not far below the surface when people stop to think about it. And so they have to be careful when they stop and think about it. But that's where I think it comes back to like the thoughtful rumination. It's not this maladaptive rumination and intrusive thoughts. It's this, you can't pretend like nothing ever bothers you,
Right.
you know, because it does.
Should that be
it is
training?
programmed in there.
Should that be implemented? Should that be implemented in training? Because, you know, like in the academies, we got young impressionable kids coming through the academy, and you know they're being trained like robots. So
Yeah.
should we be putting that in? Should we be putting that in a training program to say, hey, it's okay?
I personally think so. I think the training program is important, but the other piece that I think is so important is really walking the walk and talking the talk. You know, if you have a young firefighter that comes in, is in training, and you're like, you know, you're going to have these experiences, you have to process what's going on, you know, this is how you build resilience, but then they go into a firehouse where the 30-year captain is like,
Yeah.
keep your mouth shut. You know what I mean? Like then it's not gonna work. And that's where I do think like the peer. So we did a study where we looked at kind of more of a peer approach. It was using the National Fallen Firefighter Stress First Aid Intervention, but a lot of the departments also had the IAFF peer training that they developed, which is fantastic. But the focus really being on not, you know, let's show up and fix it once it's broken, but how do we all work together? Like, we do know that there's so much at the risk of sounding like touchy-feely hokey, there's so much that is healing around the kitchen table and just having those conversations.
Yes.
And paying attention to each other, because you are the worst judge of your own mental health, really. I mean, you got to be usually pretty far gone before you go, oh, wait, I'm not myself.
Yeah.
So I think that having the types of trainings where people feel like it's okay when they start noticing, like, hey, why is Frank such an asshole lately? Like, that they can go up and go, hey, you've been more of an asshole lately than usual. Like, what are you, what's up? And I don't, I think sometimes it gets to the point, especially if it's not managed kind of along the way, and then there are those instances where it is to the point where, you absolutely need professional help, and we know that there are treatments that are really effective. So use them, because you wouldn't tell someone not to take their blood pressure medication, and that's
Right.
how the treatments are retraining your brain, rewiring it. But I think those types of, I think it does have to be, for lack of a better word, a culture shift within a department and within a crew that, we all understand that some of this stuff's going to bother you. And just like a dirty gear and a black helmet 20 years ago was acceptable, now that's not impressive, because
Right,
you're just
right.
being stupid. So
Right.
I think we have to do the same thing around behavioral health, where, a stiff upper lip and you're fine, even though we all know and are denying the fact that you're drinking a case of beer every day off.
Yeah,
I think that, it's got.
Yeah, no, this is fascinating. We're gonna, I feel like I could do a whole nother hour. We're definitely gonna have you back on the show. We got to just wrap up today. So how can people find you? Where do you spend most of your time? Facebook, Twitter? How can we get in touch?
I am just learning the Twitter, so you won't be too impressed with it.
The Twitter?
But the Twitter. Oh, I felt like an idiot when I had to ask my postdoc, can you teach me how to twit stuff? And he's like, it's tweet. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's what I meant. So now I'm not sounding young, am I? But I am on Twitter, and I put, so my handle, right, my @ is Sara Ann, SARAANNE 71. And so I put up, every once in a while, I put some stuff about my kids, or my 3-year-old has Down syndrome, so I'll tweet stuff about Down syndrome awareness. But a lot of the other stuff I do is fire stuff. So that's probably the best place. We have our Center for Fire Rescue and EMS Health Research also has a Facebook page. So those are probably the two best ways.
All right.
Well, Sara, thank you so much for joining in and taking the time
Yeah.
to discuss this. We are going to be hosting a Zoom Mental Health Monday meeting on Monday. This coming Monday. If you care to, we'll send you the link. If you care to join in, if you have the time,
Awesome.
you're more than welcome to, and share it with others around in your profession if they want to. It's a place where we can all collaborate and discuss and help the mental health of our first responders. once again, stay so blessed, and I appreciate everything you've done. And we'd like to get you into the studio one day, and once this pandemic's over,
Yes,
and
thank
really
you so
sit
much.
and do this. All right.
That sounds great. And thanks for all you guys do. It's just amazing. It's amazing that this is like you're making a difference.
No,
Well,
thank you for
Thank
that.
you. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you, Sarah.
We'll talk soon.
Take
Have
care.
a great day.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Stay sane. Bye.
All right, man. That was Sara
Jahnke, doctor.
Dr. Sara Jahnke, with the fire.
She's the director and senior scientist of the Center for Fire Rescue and EMS Health Research.
Yes, check her out.
Yes.
I hate to cut you short, but we got to go. We are over our time limit, as is. Once again, thank you for joining in on Mad Radio, Making a Difference Wednesday here on FBRN.us, the Fishbowl Radio Network at Globe Life Field. Check us out every Wednesday between 6 and 7. We're going to be making a difference with you here in the Fishbowl. And join us on Monday for our Zoom call. Until then, be blessed.
Bye, everybody.